What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Fitter Food Radio. And this week, it's just me. Just little old me. Keris has done a runner. Charming, innit? I'm joking. But this is actually my first solo podcast. I know Keris has done a fair few of them over the years, but I'm breaking my solo podcast virginity today. But I'm actually quite excited about it. Some of you might be thinking, uh-oh, there's no one to keep Matt on track, control his waffle, but I shall do my very best. But what I wanted to talk about today, guys, was essentially my approach to fat loss. So a typical example of how I would work with a new client who came to me who wanted to drop some body fat. All right. Now, everything I do is dependent on the client. However, I do have a template that I follow, if you will, because it works, it adds the structure, it adds the foundation that we can base it all on. And then we change things as we need to along the way, depending on the client's goals, their progressions, etc., etc., etc. But the reason I wanted to do this is because there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of conflicting advice out there. And some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's downright ugly. But the thing that bugs me the most is these layers of complication that are thrown into the mix to, I think, make things sound a bit sexier, to make something more marketable, if you will. But I just want to strip this right back, talk straight facts, keep things as simple as possible so that come the end of this episode, guys, you're going to have a really good idea of how to approach things, but more importantly, how to adapt things for real life, okay? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So this brings me to a really good starting point, because naturally, when someone starts a fat loss journey, a weight loss journey, if you will, they want results, right? They want to lose body fat, they want to lose weight, etc. And it's kind of understandable that they want to achieve this result as quickly as possible. Why wouldn't you? But the reality is this promotes that classic all or nothing mentality, this all or nothing approach, which I get to a degree because you want results and you want results quickly. But it doesn't work. But oftentimes people approach it in this way only to realize it's short-lived, because it's bloody hard work and it's unsustainable. And once life does a little bit of a number and throws a spanner in the works, it's made even harder. So then they take a break from it. And then the worst thing is, instead of going, you know what, I've tried it this way many times before, maybe it doesn't work, maybe there's another way that I should try, people often turn on themselves and they start saying, oh, I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not hardworking enough. I need to do better. I'm not motivated enough, etc., etc. It's like they turn on themselves and start pointing the finger at them rather than going, actually, maybe it's the approach. Maybe the approach is wrong and I should go about it differently. Well, I'm here to tell you to go about it differently. What's the expression? To do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome is the definition of insanity or something like that. You get the picture, whether I've butchered that quote or not. It's along those lines. So I'm here to kind of give you a bit of an insight into how I approach things, how to get around bumps in the road, how to keep the wheels moving in the right direction while still enjoying an element of flexibility, social occasions, holidays, anniversaries, whatever it may be, just enjoying a little bit of what you fancy. Because I think a lot of people build fat loss into this really horrible, difficult, rigid, bland, boring thing. And that's why it's almost hard before they've started. Now, I'm not going to tell you that fat loss is easy, because it's not. And anyone who markets themselves or their services in a way that implies fat loss is easy, run a mile, keep scrolling, because it's not about making it easy. We can certainly make it easier, but the idea here is to make it less complicated, as simple as possible, so that we remove as many obstacles as we can, all right, to make life a little bit easier for you and to increase the likelihood that you'll stick to the plan. So let's assume a client has come to me. They want to lose body fat. We know that we need to create an energy deficit, a calorie deficit, all right? It's that classic sum of fewer calories need to be coming in than is going out for a long enough period of time for your body to start using stored body fat as fuel. And, you see a smaller number on the scale, knowing that you've lost body fat and not just body weight, et cetera, right? So how do we go about this? So my approach does vary a little bit client to client, but I'm going to kind of give you an overview of like a nice general rule of thumb, if you will. So the first thing that we want to establish is where the client is currently at. Now, I'm a firm believer in tracking and non-tracking methods to get results, but I do like new clients to track a little bit because it just gives a little bit of more context to what's going on, rather than just keeping like a general food diary, which at face value might look okay, but might not necessarily show you, how many calories someone's consuming, or what the actual volume of food is per meal. If someone's like, oh, I just had like chicken, rice and veg, it's like, okay, cool. How much chicken, how much rice, how much veg, etc. So I like clients to track for a week, or the very least of 5 days, 5 days, with one of those days being a Saturday or a Sunday or a weekend, because things tend to vary at the weekend, right? People are off work generally, spending time with the family, socializing, eating out, etc., etc. So not only does this give me a really good snapshot of the client's eating habits, but it also gets them into the habit of tracking. And sometimes it's good for people to see things in black and white and go, blimey, I didn't realize I was eating that much. If I was doing a guesstimate, I never would have thought I was consuming that many calories, which is why it's a really good exercise for people to do. Is it a bit time consuming? Yes. Is it a little bit tedious? Yes. But like all things, the more you do it, the better you get, the quicker you get. It's not such a big deal. You just need to get over that initial bit, okay? And I think it's much better for the person to kind of see the numbers and go, whoa, this is the reality, because it just gives them a little bit of a kick up the arse, if you will, to make some changes. Whereas a lot of people come to me, they're like, oh, I actually think I eat pretty well. But eating pretty well and eating too much are not necessarily the same, right? Because there is such a thing as eating too much of a good thing. For example, we used to have a lot of people come to us that turned to a paleo diet. And of course, we come from a paleo background, if you will. Things have like evolved a little bit for us over the years, but it's a really good template to work from for sure. But the general advice from a lot of people in the paleo crowd was you kind of eat what you want as long as it's paleo, as long as it's unprocessed. But there are a lot of highly nutritious foods that pack a real calorie punch. Generally foods that contain fats like nuts and seeds. It's easy to eat a lot of those. Avocados as well. They were the real like poster boy of foods for a while. Again, pretty high in fat. It's easy to consume a lot of calories there. So people were wondering why they were turning to this lovely natural diet, paleo diet, and gaining weight. Because even though the food was nutritious, unprocessed, they were consuming too many calories. So again, this is why tracking can be incredibly beneficial. And it's not something that needs to be done forever. This is like something I want to make really clear. And I make this very clear to my clients. It's like, this is to just get our initial snapshot, and then we can make a decision based off of this, okay? So once I've got an idea, I've got a clear picture of not only how many meals they eat a day, like what kind of foods that they like to eat. I look for easy wins, some real low-hanging fruit, because my goal with any coaching client is to test their willpower as little as possible. So it's like, essentially, how can we change as little as possible to get the result that we want? Right? That's the goal here. Whereas most people approach it with, how can I make as many changes as humanly possible in order to speed up this process as much as I can and get the result that I want as soon as I can, right? But we know this doesn't work, okay? It's too rigid, it lacks flexibility. You will crash and burn sooner rather than later, and then the cycle repeats, okay? So it's like, right, what are the needle movers that are going to get the result that we want without being this too much of a shock to the system? This can be really, really little things, guys. As it might be reducing someone's tea and coffee intake because they have milk with each one and maybe a little bit of sugar. So straight away, there's some easy wins there, because there's obviously calories in milk, there's calories in sugar. We can reduce that. Maybe someone's a little bit of a habitual snacker. Habitual, is that the right word? check me out. You know, sometimes you say a word and it's like, it just doesn't sound right when you say it, but we're going to go with it. We're going to go with it. And it's like, do you really need that snack? Here's the God's honest truth, right? 99% of people do not need to snack, assuming that their main meals are substantial enough, right? Most people's snacks come from pure routine and habit, boredom. So there's an element of comfort eating there. You know, someone might come around as well with a biscuit tin, you know, mid-morning, be like, hey, cup of tea, couple of biscuits. You're like, oh yeah, go on then. A couple of biscuits won't hurt. And the truth is a couple of biscuits won't hurt, but a couple of biscuits every day, 5 days a week in the office, these things accumulate. Again, an easy win would be, gosh, take those biscuits away, reduce those milky coffees just a little bit. That in itself could easily save you a couple of thousand calories across the course of the week, depending on how many you're eating. Again, the other one is a more healthy snack. Nuts, seeds, again, unprocessed, get a bit of a protein hit, fiber hit, some good fats, if you will. But they pack a calorie punch and it's easy to kind of keep going with them, right? So if you've got a big bag of nuts there, you know, it's easy to consume too many. I'm terrible with nuts. It's almost best I don't buy them because I just can't stop, especially if they're salted and roasted. Lovely. So again, it's like, what are the easy wins here that we can look for to just get the wheels in motion? And you'll be surprised at how much of a positive impact this has in people, even in the first week or two. You know, this calorie saving of the snacks and the teas and coffees, et cetera, et cetera. And we move with that. And my rule of thumb is, guys, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if that's causing the weight to move in the right direction, the client's like, oh, do you know what? I do miss the odd biscuit every now and again, but actually I'm okay. And because I can see things going the way I want them to on the scales, I'm happy to continue this, right? The only time I would change things is when we need to. There is absolutely 0 point making a change if you don't need to make a change. So if weight's coming down, great. If it stops and there's a little bit of a plateau there, it's like, right, okay, cool. This is actually a good thing. So this is the other thing that I do with clients is I help them reframe their journey. So rather than them going, hey, I haven't changed anything. I'm still exercising. I made the changes to my nutrition. The first few weeks or so, I was losing X amount per week, but it stopped. I don't understand. The reason this is a good thing is when you, let's say for argument's sake, you tap your metrics into a calorie calculator, right? This takes into account obviously like your height, your age, your sex, your activity level, right? And it gives you a snapshot of what your maintenance calories are. This is like your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. This is the amount of energy, the amount of calories you need to simply exist, okay, to support like heart function, lung function, etc., etc. Then, of course, on top of that, it will take into account the amount of exercise that you do and the physicality of your job. And of course, that will add some calories on top of that. Your maintenance calories is obviously for you to stay as you are, yeah, to fuel your body to stay exactly as you are. If we want to lose weight, then we need to consume a little bit less of that. Or the other option, of course, is to increase our energy expenditure. But for now, let's assume you exercise enough, right? You walk every day, you go to the gym 3-4 times a week, maybe you play a bit of tennis, whatever. Yeah, your exercise is good. That's all taken care of. So if you've hit a bit of a plateau, it's a good thing because you've lost weight. There's less of you. And the only thing is with that is when there's less of you, that calculation I mentioned earlier that takes into account your age, height, weight, sex, etc., is going to be different. Good chance you're the same age, right? Unless you've had a birthday in between, but that's not going to change things too much. You probably haven't got any taller or any shorter, but you weigh less. Okay, this means your BMR is lower. So unfortunately, that does mean we now need to do something to place you in a calorie deficit once more. Because generally speaking, people hit a plateau when they're no longer in a calorie deficit. So again, we go back to the drawing board. What are the new changes we can create to once again get things moving in the right direction? Now, this is where we may get a little bit more specific with the tracking side of things and look at an actual calorie budget, if you will. So the way that would work is instead of working on a day-to-day basis with calories, I like to work on a weekly calorie budget, because the reality is, like, if you're in a deficit for a day, your body's not going to lose a chunk of body fat in one day. Same goes for if you're in a calorie surplus for one day, your body's not going to gain a chunk of body fat in one day. It just doesn't work like that, right? So if we look at this as a 7-day calorie budget that gives you a daily average calorie count. Now, for ease, we're just going to go with 7,000, right? So let's say your weekly calorie budget is 7,000, okay? One option is just have 1,000 calories per day. I'm not suggesting 1,000 calories per day, by the way. That's far too low. But just for example's sake, maths is not my strong point. So we're going to stick with this, yeah? But you might say to yourself, but, I'm going out for dinner with my partner on Saturday. I'd like to, enjoy that meal and have a little bit more flexibility there. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, where can we save some calories? Where can we bank some calories on the other days to account for a higher calorie intake on the Saturday or whatever day it is you're going out for this meal? Because your weekly budget is your weekly budget. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you spend on each day, as long as you don't go over your weekly budget. This is the most important thing. Now, it's probably easy if you view this as money, as currency. Yeah, you got 7,000 quid per week. God, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? That's a budget and a half. You can spend it however you want to, but once that 7,000's gone, it's gone. Yeah, so it's entirely up to you. If you have a massive blowout midweek, it's like, you've got to scrimp and scrape for the rest of the week, yeah? But the reality is most people generally want their flexibility at the weekend. That's when they want to spend more. That's when they want to consume more calories. So it's like, okay, cool. So in the week, let's plan ahead. I've got this date night on the Saturday. Where can I bank some calories so that I can enjoy that and not take me out of my calorie deficit that I've created Monday to Friday? All right. And then you approach it like that, because this not only allows you to create the flexibility that you want, but it also gets you into the habit of adapting your calories based on the week ahead. So this works great when you know things are coming up, so plan ahead as much as you possibly can. If you've got like a work event, like I said, a social occasion, whatever it may be, plan ahead for this. But I also understand that things, sometimes come up last minute, like a work situation, or there might be a friend in need and you go out, you have a couple of glasses of wine or whatever it may be. So, of course, if you do this after the fact, that is also fine. You might go, I didn't plan for that, but, that's kind of it, eating into my weekly budget of this much, but cool. I can adapt some things elsewhere to make sure that's taken into account and it keeps things moving. As I mentioned earlier, of course, increasing energy output can most definitely help you as well, but we don't want to be too reliant on this. And this is another common mistake people make, is they maybe focus a little bit too much on the energy output and not enough on what's coming in. Now, when you're tracking, it's a little bit easier to kind of get on top of that. But when people are guessing, that's when things can go a little bit peaked on, because often what will happen is people massively underestimate the amount of calories they're consuming, and they massively overestimate the calories that they're burning, because the misunderstanding happens with like any form of like intense exercise is a great example, because people will associate effort and fatigue with calorie burn. But if you look at some like typical CrossFit workouts, which are very short in duration, very fast, furious, very anaerobic, you finish it, your heart rate's through the roof, you're dripping in sweat, you're collapsed on the floor. In your mind, you're probably thinking, oh, but I must have burnt 1,000 calories in that workout. You haven't, unfortunately, probably like 1/5, maybe a quarter of that, I don't know, depending on the individual. But it's certainly not as much as you think. But I'm going off on a tangent here. It was going to happen at some point. But another issue with too much intense exercise is it can lead to cravings. It can massively upregulate your appetite, but it can also increase your cravings for carbohydrates, for sugars, hyperpalatable foods that are quite hard to stop once you get started, which again, if you're trying to create a calorie deficit, can be problematic. So just something else to take into consideration. But if we was to just go back a couple of steps, like the whole tracking side of things, I'm a fan of it. I think everyone should at least give it a go just to kind of get that really clear picture of their current eating habits, which I always say to my clients when I get them to do like a little bit of a tracking week to get an idea, I go, look, don't change things because all of a sudden you're like, oh, Matt's going to be watching and, I need to be extra good. It's like, no, that's not going to help me because I need to get like a little bit of an insight of your current reality. So it's almost like eat the breakfast, lunch and dinners that you normally would, have those mid-morning snacks that you normally would, because then I've got like a real life example of what we're working with and I can make changes based on that. Whereas if you come back and I'm like, oh, this looks fantastic, we don't need to change anything, it's not going to work, right? But once we've got that snapshot, it's like, right, okay, does this individual need to continue tracking or can we look for the non-tracking methods? And I mentioned earlier, like just taking out the snacks, maybe reducing alcohol, reducing like milky coffee intake, sugar intake. Simple swaps come under the non-tracking methods, like, full fat milk for low fat milk, like sugary Coke for a Coke Zero, like these are really, really simple things. Low fat cheese, like Edam Light is like my favorite protein based snacks. You can get like 25 grams of protein for like 200 odd calories, happy days. So again, these little swaps can work out really, really well for you, and like I said, these are non-tracking methods, but for a lot of people, the tracking is really beneficial in the early stages whilst you're finding your feet with things, because after a while, you just have a really good idea of what's in what. Now, if you're anything like me, and this is something that I suggest a lot of my clients do, especially Monday to Friday, is kind of eat similar things. Eat things that you enjoy, hit your protein target within your calorie budget, and it's easy for you to cook it quite quickly or cook it in bulk. So, like last night's dinners is today's lunch. You know what I mean? Or you might cook enough for a few days. Really, really simple things like this just make it easier to stick to things. And generally speaking, guys, like during the week, it's a darn sight easier to tick those boxes, right? Because you've got a routine. It's like in the morning, you get up, you've got to get yourself ready for work, or you got to get the kids ready for school first. Then you commute to work, you go to work, you do your thing, your lunch breaks at the same time. There's almost like a system. There's this routine that can help really keep you accountable. And when we're busy, there's that element of distraction, which is why I said, like, the weekends tend to come with greater, cravings. What's the word? I can't think of the word right now. I've gone completely blank, but it's just a little bit harder at the weekend, right? It's a little bit harder at the weekend because we don't have as much distracting us. We're letting our hair down. We're enjoying a bit of time off after working all week. And we probably want to enjoy a little bit of what we fancy. And again, that's absolutely fine. Just do your best to account for it. So when I check in with a client on a Friday morning, for example, I can go like, hey, so your average calorie intake up until this point is this. This leaves this many calories in your weekly budget. So have fun with it. Have fun with it. Enjoy a bit of what you fancy within reason. And that in itself really, really helps. Really, really helps because you've got a really clear picture. Because you're like, oh, okay, cool. This is how the week has gone thus far. I've banked some calories here. I've banked some calories there. I can have up to this many calories this weekend if I want to. But the next point I want to make is that just because you've got a calorie target there and you've got X amount of calories left in your budget, it doesn't mean you need to have that many calories. And this is a conversation I had with a client a few weeks back. It's like, if you're not hungry or you don't fancy it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to hit that calorie number. If you're going to be a bit less, it's no drama, especially if you've got a fat loss goal, right? Because that's probably going to be reflected in the weigh-in scales as well. But it was interesting because they raised it. They were like, I saw it as a target, as in like I had to get there. And it was like, no. Like the idea is like to stay within it is probably a more accurate description of when it comes to your calorie budget. You don't have to hit it. But another thing that's really worth mentioning when chasing or pursuing a calorie deficit is, again, the all or nothing approach, because having the numbers is one thing. Having that really clear snapshot, is very, very beneficial. But that doesn't mean that you're immune to the all or nothing approach, because all of a sudden you have a number, you have something to work with. And again, that thought process can kick in of, well, hang on. Let's say, for argument's sake, my calorie budget is 1,600. Again, I'm just plucking numbers here, yeah? If I was to only consume 1,100, then, that's going to speed this process up, right? I'm going to see the number change sooner. But again, that's all well and good. And on paper, that formula works. Create a greater deficit, see a quicker result. But other things we need to take into consideration, guys, when it comes to creating a calorie deficit is energy, mood, function, productivity. And if you take your calories too low, at first you're going to be good. Yeah, the body's a wonderful thing. Yeah, it can do amazing things on minimal resources. But soon, energy levels will drop. Performance in the gym or in your training sessions will take a hit. You may feel a little bit more moody or hangry, as we call it. You might find it a little bit harder to concentrate at work. Cravings may then go up. All of a sudden, it's like, well, my energy's low. My training sucks right now. I'm craving food all the time. What comes next? A colossal binge, because I've had enough. I need all the food. So again, it's something that we need to be really, really mindful of. Don't take things too far, as tempting as it is to speed up the process, because what we really want to avoid, guys, is like this zigzag approach, this essentially yo-yo dieting approach, right? It's like, be hyper rigid, see a drop. Reality kicks in, bosh, it comes back up. All right, let's go again. See the drop. We're right back up because, life's just done its thing. I'd much rather someone make slower progress more consistently, because over the span of a month, 2 months, 3 months, the end result is going to be substantially lower than someone's just gone too hard, regained, lost, regained, and so on and so on. Okay. So what we're really looking for is, rather than that super consistent downward trajectory, which would be amazing, right? Who wouldn't want to see that? Week in, week out, epic progress, things are always moving in the right direction. The reality is, real progress doesn't happen that way. Sustainable progress does not happen that way. What we'd much rather see is the line come down. There'll be a few flat bits. There might even be the odd increase every now and again, but the overall trajectory is going downwards. It's going in the direction that we want it to. But a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle with seeing that number going up. And again, this is part of the coaching process, guys. It's helping to manage people's expectations. It's helping people to not let their mind do a number on them and kind of turn on themselves. Because I get it. If you've been putting the work in, if you've been grafting, and then you're like, hang on, how have I bloody well gained weight? You know what I mean? I've been training, I've been sticking to my calorie deficit and this, that, and the other. But, things we need to take into consideration here is number one, weight loss and fat loss are not the same, and the opposite is true. Weight gain and fat gain is not the same. So when you see, if you see a kilo drop on the weighing scales over the course of a 24-hour period, yeah, if you weigh yourself on Monday, you're one weight. You weigh yourself on Tuesday, you're a kilo lighter. You haven't lost 1 kilo of body fat in 24 hours. There's body weight fluctuates. Yeah. Water retention, et cetera, et cetera. You might have a whopping great big stool that needs to come out, which is why I always say to people, the ideal is you weigh yourself after you've done a pee and a poo and before you've had any liquids or food for the day, right? But it doesn't always work out that way. It's another reason why I don't like people weighing themselves every single day, because if you do that, you are going to see fluctuations. And for a lot of people, that's hard to see. My advice, Monday, Thursday. That's a nice couple of like weigh-in points per week, because obviously we start the week Monday, bosh, first thing in the morning, see what you're working with. Then your body can do its thing over like a 3-4 day period, being in a calorie deficit, getting your training sessions done, see where you're at on Thursday. And then that sets you up going into the weekend, and then you rinse and repeat on the Monday. Okay. So please, if anyone out there is a serial weigher of themselves every day, pack it in. Do yourself a favor. Monday, Thursday, in the morning, after a pee, after a poo, before any food or drink. Where was I going with this? Fluctuations. So, ladies, sorry to say this, but generally, women experience more weight fluctuations than men, especially around things like time of the month, which again, when I'm working with people, we can help manage this, right? When ladies see this like bit of a bump, because time of the month can increase water retention, okay? But other things that impact water retention are stress. So if things are just going mad at work, this can impact it. Sleep deprivation, maybe you got like kids keeping you up at night. We need to take this into consideration. Carbohydrate and salt intake can also impact water retention as well. So very simple way to look at this, guys, is for every gram of carbohydrate stored in the body, your body attaches about 3 to 4 grams of water with it. All right. So I had a client last month. We had a really good conversation about this, where she was in a calorie deficit, right? She was within her calorie budget, but she saw this bump up in her body weight despite the deficit. Now, when I looked at her tracking, to me, it was really, really, really simple to see, or really easy to see, should I say. She had enjoyed some flexibility at the weekend, which she'd accounted for in the week. So that was absolutely fine. But this flexibility involved eating out over the Saturday and the Sunday. Carb intake went up. Generally, restaurants will probably add a bit more salt to food than you do when you're at home. So it was less about the calories. In this instance, it was this bit of a sudden increase in carbohydrate intake and salt intake across the 2 days where she'd enjoyed some higher calories whilst being within her weekly calorie budget. And that was reflected in the scale. And I just said, hey, look, don't give yourself a hard time. I'm not surprised to see this at all. Trust the process. Get back in the game and see we're out on Thursday. Lo and behold, she got to Thursday, not only had that weight that had gone, but she'd lost even more as well. And this is how the body works, guys. We need to give it an opportunity to kind of create that equilibrium, if we will, to rebalance itself when there have been like an increase in carbs and salt intake, an increase in stress, time of the month, etc., right? But one thing I want to be very, very clear is weight fluctuates. Plain and simple. Even if you're in a deficit day in, day out, week in, week out, that number is just not going to be going in this continuous downward direction. It just doesn't work like that. So again, the sooner you can get your head in the game with this, the better, because you're like, this happens. This is all part of the process. It should happen this way. Same goes if you just weighed yourself numerous times in the same day. You'd get numerous different readings. It'd be up, it'd be down, it'd be all over the shop. That's why, again, Monday to Thursday, for me, is a real sweet spot. So the next bit is like, do you truly need to track? No. Should you try tracking 100%? And then you can make a decision for yourself. You may find initially tracking gets you to where you need to be. You're then very informed. You know what's what. You know how to adapt things. You're good. You no longer need to track. You may be someone who's really bloody busy. The last thing you want to be doing is tapping stuff in onto your phone and tracking away. As I say, I like everybody trying it, but it's not the only way. It's simply a way. And then we can look at the non-tracking methods to keep things moving in the right direction. So to give you another example of some non-tracking methods, so I'll just run through a little bit of a list, right? These are kind of like my go-tos, yeah? So number one could be walk more. Yeah, just increase your step count. You know what I mean? So this isn't even food related, you know, like, is there a way of increasing your step count each day? Similar to calories, I like people to have a weekly step count target, because some days it just doesn't happen, right? You know, it could be it's pissing down with rain all day. You haven't had a chance to get out. Fine. You know, you can make up for it on another day. But this is a really, really easy way to not only increase your energy output, it's great for your headspace as well. And if you are training, it's an excellent recovery tool also. Number 2, ditch the snacks. Most people don't need them. If you are going to snack, make it protein based, right? If you're just like smashing a couple of biscuits or so mid-morning, like, that's not a genuine need for food. That's just, you want a biscuit. You want something sweet, right? So it's like, could we replace this for something that's much lower in calories and much higher in nutrients? Berries is a great example. They're sweet, can curb a sweet tooth, high in fiber, and super low calories. Raspberries, blueberries, excellent example. If you struggle to eat large amount of protein in your square meals, by all means, make it a protein-based snack. You know, I can eat hard-boiled eggs. Oh, my bad. Soft-boiled eggs. Who wants an hard-boiled egg? No, thanks. You know, I can eat them till the cows come home. So couple of them as a little snack to keep hunger at bay till your next meal. Happy days. Like I said, low fat Baby Bell, absolute winner. Love those things. Those protein yogurts that you can get, Lidl do some great examples there. But as I say, if you can get through with no snacks, this is a great way to go about it, because chances are you don't need it. Another thing is just ensuring you have protein at each meal. You know, so having an understanding of what your protein sources are, and just making sure that they are present at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Right, protein is great for increasing the satiety of a meal, can keep you fuller for longer, and generally speaking, you know, like lean protein, for example, is a very low calorie way of adding volume to your plate. Other tracking methods can be like looking at your liquid calories. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, like, are you adding like a ton of milk and sugar to your coffees? Can we reduce those? Can we reduce sugar for sweetener? Can we reduce soft drinks for zero sugar options? What's your alcohol intake like? You know, I'm not saying that you can't have alcohol when being in a calorie deficit, but it makes sense not to drink too much of it, right? You know, and to get a handle on that. I used to train a guy who decided he wanted to stop drinking. Okay. That was his choice. It wasn't my suggestion, because he was just like, it's just got a bit out of hand. And he lost weight. He made zero changes to his nutrition, carried on training as he was, and the weight just started coming off, which kind of probably gives you an idea of how much alcohol he was drinking across the course of the week. So it was less about binge drinking and more about just little and often, I guess. But, you know, he liked a beer. You know, beer can be quite calorific, you know, once the pints start clocking up. But again, just to give you an example here. But at the end of the day, what we need to focus on is the desired outcome. Okay, if you've got a desired outcome, a result that you're wanting to achieve, we need to make sure that your actions are aligned with that goal. You know, it's plain and simple. So if you don't want to track, but non-tracking methods aren't working, then it's kind of my job to be like, well, maybe you need to look at a different option. Because going back to what I said earlier, guys, like, if you keep doing the same thing and just hoping that the next time it's going to be different because, oh, work's not as stressful now, or, you know, the kids have gone off to university, or whatever it might be, you know what I mean? Like, insert justification for why you didn't do the thing here. And then you think it's going to be different. But 9 times out of 10, it's not. That's not the issue. It's just, it's not the approach for you. You know, it's not getting the result that you want. And this is why a lot of the times people eventually do come around to the tracking side of things, whether they like it or not. But again, you know, it needs to work for the individual. I'm not going to force anyone to do anything. But like I said, the more you do it, the easier it gets, the quicker it gets, the less tedious it is. And it gives you a much more accurate snapshot. So this is exactly how I approach it, guys. It's like, step 1, get the client to track, see where they're at. Step 2, look for the real low-hanging fruit changes. What are the really easy wins that we can make to start building some momentum. Step 3, keep going with whatever you're doing until it stops working. You don't change things just because you think you should. Just keep going with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Step 4, let's assume you've hit a plateau. Right. Let's rerun the TDEE, that's total daily energy expenditure calculator again, because there's now less of you. Congratulations, you've lost weight, which is what you wanted to achieve. This is going to change things on the BMR side of things. So we may need to look at ways to put you into a calorie deficit once more. But again, what's the lowest hanging fruit here? Has your step count taken a dip for whatever reason? Could we bring that back up? Could we change those meals just a little bit to increase the calorie deficit? And again, if we see things moving in the right direction, happy days. We're back on track. We're moving in the direction that we want. We keep going with it until again, it's no longer working. So essentially, that is the biggest take home, guys. Keep doing what you're doing until it's no longer working. Then make a change. But make the littlest change possible to get things moving in the right direction. Now, you've only got to spend like 10 minutes on Instagram, right? And you're going to see all these men and women who look incredible, let's face it, probably giving you completely conflicting advice. You're like, hang on, well, they look amazing and they said this. They look phenomenal and they said that. I don't really know like where to start. But things that really, really bug me is, number one, your lack of progress is not down to your supplement stack. Yeah. Number two, I can almost guarantee it's not related to how much protein that you're consuming, although a lot of people could do with eating a bit more protein. Protein is not the hero it's made out to be, because I work with people who would really, really struggle to hit the protein targets that get thrown around on social media sometimes. Like, again, for me, low-hanging fruit with someone who struggles to eat protein is simply increase their protein. We don't focus on the number, right? We just focus on getting into the habit of eating more protein. And then we can cross that bridge of like a target down the line, So protein's important, but so are carbohydrates, so are fats, yet protein has almost been placed on this pedestal. Yes, it can increase the satiety of a meal. Yes, it can keep you fuller for longer and help you control your appetite. But, it's not the answer. It's not the solution, but it can be part of the solution, okay? So that actually kind of leads me nicely into my next point, guys, because ultimately the secret sauce, if you will, to fat loss is creating adherence and consistency, right? Because it's not about being in a calorie deficit for a week or 2 weeks. We want this to occur over a prolonged period of time, depending on the client, depending on their goal, how much weight they need to lose, want to lose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So my goal is to create as much adherence as possible, which, as I said earlier, is to test willpower as little as possible. So we need to make sure that they get in enough in the way of food volume so they feel satiated and feel full and satisfied after a meal. There needs to be enjoyment, 100%, because otherwise that gets boring real quick. And there needs to be an element of flexibility. And again, that goes back to like just social occasions, eating out, having a takeaway with the family and just managing that in the best way that we possibly can. But this is why, again, we need to move away from that consistent downward trajectory. And sometimes with clients, I take a calculated diet break, if you will. Now, a diet break isn't just like, hey, I can just eat and drink whatever I want. No. The idea here is we go into a stint of maintenance. Okay. So a great example is if you're going on holiday for a week. Yeah. No one wants to be trying to be like hit a calorie deficit when they're on holiday. But equally, no one wants to come back substantially heavier than before they went, especially if they've, done a bloody good job of losing weight and being in a calorie deficit and getting some epic results. So we have a plan for that. We plan ahead and go, hey, look, don't worry about trying to lose weight for whilst you're away. Here's how you can enjoy the flexibility you want from a holiday whilst ticking plenty of other boxes so that when you come back, you've either not, you don't weigh any different, you weigh the same. Or maybe you've gained, a few pounds, which is probably mostly water weight anyway, because, you had more chips than normal, a bit more alcohol than normal. And, it's only a matter of time before that water weight comes off, right? And this is a plan for a calculated diet break, which works wonders, because if someone knows a diet break is coming, it's almost like, okay, well, I can work to this and then, I can just ease off a little bit, have a little bit of a break, keep things where we are, and then we go on another push. And that again ties in with what I mentioned earlier of like result. Sometimes things may plateau naturally, or it may be a calculated diet break. And then we go again, and then we flatline, and then we go again. And again, like I said, this just takes real life into consideration, folks. So I just want to leave you with one last point before I go, because I feel like I've covered quite a lot here. If I get this done under the hour, I'm going to be mega proud of myself. But this does depend on, massively on the individual, and definitely, depends on you if you're a man or a woman, because obviously there are differences. But what I always like say to my coaching clients is like, you're not just going to be forever in a calorie deficit. It's not like, this is your life now, just consuming less and less and less calories. Because obviously there's going to come a time where you, get to a weight you are incredibly happy with. You like how you look, you like how you feel, you like how your clothes fit, you like how you look without your clothes on. Happy days, right? You're winning, your training's going well, you're getting strong. You're there. Now it's a case of like, just maintaining this incredible result that you've achieved. And by this point, assuming myself or, whoever you're working with has done a good job, you're going to have everything that you need to know to sustain these things, right? How to create flexibility, how to adapt around like stressful situations, less ideal situations, travel, socializing, etc., etc. But, depending on your goal, like for example, one of my male coaching clients right now, we're on like a fat loss push, right? And the goal is to get body fat levels as low as we can. And by that, I don't mean like physically, as low as we physically can, as in like as low as we can to a point that's completely aligned with what their goal is. Once we get there, the goal is then to build things back up. It's like, right, we've got body composition to a level that we are happy with, right? So now the goal is to see how much we can increase calories. This is what we call like a reverse dieting, if you will. How can we increase calories? How much can we increase calories even without gaining body fat back, right? And actually the weight that we're going to gain is muscle. We're going to gain strength. Yeah, we're going to improve performance, fitness. We're going to be able to so this particular client has got an endurance goal, so as well as like strength training, does a lot of endurance work as well. So it's like, right, okay, if there's less of you, it's going to help you with the endurance stuff for sure. And then we can just be a little bit more specific with the performance stuff and just bring calories up and essentially just keep nudging it up until we're like, okay, we've reached that point now where we're like, okay, cool. We're maintaining body composition, we're building muscle, we're increasing strength, we're improving performance. All the numbers are moving in the direction that we want it to. And again, like we had a check-in the other week, like it's nice to know that when you're in a deficit, and let's be honest, like, no one wants to be in a deficit. No one wants to consume less, right? So we want to make sure it's as easy to stick to as possible, right? Considering the fact that it's never easy. But he said, it's just nice to know that I'm not far away from increasing my calories again. So we almost saw it as a little bit of a target. So when I get there, I can eat more. And I'm not going to go right back to where I was, because there's a plan here. There's a process, if you see what I mean. And even though I've used a male example, this applies to women as well, like depending on whatever your goals are. But generally speaking, the idea is get to a point that you're really, really happy with overall. And it not only, is aligned with that, the aesthetic goal that you have, but it's completely aligned with that day-to-day energy, health, well-being, vitality. You know what I mean? It's like, this is like so important, guys. It's so important. Like, and I think for me, like this is a big reframe that needs to happen when it comes to weight loss, because it's all too easy to just think like, weight loss is just this really horrible, restrictive thing that's just an absolute grind and an absolute slog. And it's just going to have this really negative impact on my social life and my mood and all of that. And it's not, if you do it right, it's not going to have that impact. And you can enjoy flexibility, you can enjoy socializing. But again, if you're all or nothing, it ain't never going to work, because if you're going to go all in, don't call your friends, don't go out, don't do anything fun, just get up, meal prep, train, go to work, sleep. That's the true kind of, that's the all in approach, right? I don't wish that on anybody. And that is not my approach. You need to socialize, you need to have fun. You need to eat out, enjoy that flexibility, because it 100% can be enjoyed when pursuing a fat loss goal. But a lot of people struggle to see things that way. Even my coaching clients that I've been working with for some months now, and this is why the power of repetition is a thing. It's not like say it once, they get it. It's like say it once, a little bit might sink in until the next time. And then you got to say it again, and you got to keep reminding them and keep reassuring them. But essentially that's what coaching is, guys, right? Because some things are drummed into us. This all or nothing mentality, for a lot of people, it's in here, it's embedded. Same as like good food, bad food. This is healthy, this is unhealthy. I can have this, I can't have that. These are the things we need to move away from. Generally speaking, a really simplified approach to this would be protein at each meal. If you don't have a problem hitting your eating protein, then we can maybe look at having like an actual protein target, anywhere between 1.2 up to 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight, depending on the individual, depending on their training, depending on what their protein intake was like initially, and then calories. Weekly calorie budget, daily protein target. These are the two important ones. Carbohydrates and fats, generally speaking, guys, if you're eating a varied diet, right, your carbs and fats are going to take care of themselves, which means your fiber is going to be taken care of, your different types of fats are going to be taken care of. You don't need to worry about that. In my experience, the only people that I really need to actually give them specifics on their carbohydrate and fat intake are endurance athletes. People that, we need to make room within their calories to make sure that they take on adequate carbohydrates. Protein generally will stay the same, but in order to make room for more carbs, we can bring fats down a little bit. Yeah, but like I said, most people, they don't need to worry about that. It's less about what they're consuming within their calories and more about how many calories they're consuming over a weekly basis, and obviously over a period of time. So that's pretty much it, folks. Like, there's a lot I've put in there, but the biggest take home here is it's not as complicated as you may think it is, but it's not easy, but it can be made easier. My advice is, wherever you're at right now, assess the situation and look for the low-hanging fruit. What are the easy wins? And there's always easy wins. There's always low-hanging fruit. Even for myself, for example, because sometimes things slip. Generally, my training's on point. My nutrition is pretty bang on. Do I love ice cream? Yes. Do I like beer and whiskey? Yes. Do I eat pizza? I do, and I love it. But that's not what I need to worry about. Okay, those things generally are kind of like nicely balanced within what I do. For me, it's just the little things. Like some days, like recently, I've probably spent too much time in front of my laptop working. And granted, I had work to do, but my step count's taken a hit. That for me is less about body composition and more about, I just feel better when I get out for a walk, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to get back into that. I've let that slip. Same as my nighttime routine has gone out the window a little bit. Okay, so I know I'm moving away here from nutrition, but that's only because my nutrition is, for the best part, it's pretty good. It's flexible. I enjoy my food. I've got no qualms there. But if you spend enough time kind of thinking about, hey, what have I neglected a little bit? What have I let slip? What's the easy win here? Have the biscuits crept in a little bit too much? Am I having one or two more coffees than I actually need? Have the midweek vinos crept in again? Maybe I could get on top of that. And again, without going extreme. Okay, no biscuits ever, no snacks ever again. Oh, I'm going teetotal. You don't need to go there. It's like, okay, but how could I improve this situation just a little bit? Now, this is the template I follow with all of my one-to-one coaching clients, okay? But the good news is like anyone that comes into any of our group plans is like, this is the template we follow. It's almost like one-to-one for a group. Why would it change? All right. And this is exactly what our up-and-coming transformation plan Fitter 12 is based on. It's these one-to-one training and nutrition and lifestyle principles that we use with our clients. If the name hasn't given it away, it's a 12-week transformation plan broken down into 3 4-week phases. Now, the reason we break it down into phases, guys, first and foremost, is it gives you a real element of focus for a 4-week period. Okay. So it prevents you kind of like getting too far ahead of yourself, thinking what's next, what's after that. Just focus on the phase that you're in. But the biggest benefit, guys, is it just removes overwhelm. If we can approach things in a much more of a step change manner. So, okay, these are the changes I'm making in phase 1. Yeah. And then phase 2, we build on what has been achieved in phase 1. Yeah. And then the same goes for phase 3. So there's this lovely, steady progression, but the progression is personalized. It's not a copy and paste like, oh, hey, phase 2, now you're going to do this. It's like, no, only do this. If you've done this in phase 1, if you've done this in phase 1, you can do this. If you haven't, no drama, we can do this instead, and this is where the personalization aspect comes into the mix. So this is the first time we've created a group training plan with one-to-one personalization. So this is the ultimate hybrid plan, guys. You've got all the benefits of the community, the camaraderie of the group, but then you've got the one-to-one precision and personalization with having essentially Keris and I in your back pocket for 12 weeks. So we would absolutely love to have you. Because of the one-to-one nature, guys, places are, of course, limited because there's only so much we could do, do you know what I mean? But yeah, we would absolutely love to have you. Any questions, please do reach out. You know where to get us, info@fitterfood.com, or just catch us on Instagram, probably is the best place. But other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, guys. Any questions on this, anything I've said, if I can help you in any way with your nutrition, please do get in touch. But as I say, guys, like if you've tried and tried again and again with the same approach, it's time for a change, people. It's not you. It's the approach, and it just comes with a little bit of a reframe, coming at it from a different angle, getting your head around, taking a little bit longer, having a little bit more patience, but seeing a much more downward trajectory compared to this all or nothing approach that people keep going back to because they keep thinking it's going to be different, and it ain't. It ain't no different, God damn it. You might last a little bit longer than you did before, but it's only a matter of time. So there it is, folks. Big, big love. And I will see your good selves in the next episode. Hey, see ya.